The Ember Island Players is, for most of Team Avatar, a relatively lighthearted episode. It constitutes one last break before the final battle. It is one last moment to take a deep breath, have some enjoyment, and relax before the situation gets very serious. Yes, it is not a happy episode necessarily, especially at the end, but it is a rather comedic episode. It's a lighthearted episode. The Fire Nation wins at the end, but only in the format of a play, a spectacle. And though the spectacle does demonstrate the extent to which the Fire Nation is able to perpetuate a certain image of its dominance, not through sheer physical force, but through culture and spectacle, there is nonetheless a sense of relief by the end. After the serious episodes that came before the Ember Island Players, it represents a slight oasis, mild and not entirely restorative, yet still fundamentally a relief that regenerates the spirits of the lost and weary before the final confrontation. But for Zuko, the episode is something a little different. And I believe it is compelling and edifying to examine Zuko's reactions in this episode, how and more importantly why they differ so substantially from those of the rest of Team Avatar, and then take a look at what the differences in these reactions say about the play as a whole, Zuko's dark backstory as a whole, and the idea of spectacle and what it perpetuates. This episode is, to be as overt as possible, largely comedic for the rest of Team Avatar because they do not have a lot to be ashamed about. Their gaffes and mishaps are largely of the jokesy kind. That does not mean they have not made any mistakes. I distinctly remember the time when Aang abandoned the rest of Team Avatar in the middle of the desert when they had no water and a very limited hope of survival just to desperately look for Appa. But they have, in a grand perspective, been pursuing what is right. The little play does not necessarily portray them as right, as it is Fire Nation propaganda, but it nonetheless portrays them as jokesy, kind-hearted, slightly silly and absurd people who travel across the land and act according to their ideals, which is surprisingly accurate, considering that the play is propaganda. It views them in a more negative light. Before the final failure against the Fire Nation, the play is more or less accurate. There are many inaccuracies that one can joke about, but for the most part, the play portrays the basic essence of their adventures. When there are differences from real events, such as Toph being this burly, muscly dude who shouts at people, it's funny, it's charming. Toph loves it. Katara is much less charmed by her portrayal, not least because it's not particularly true to who she is. While she does have a side of her that is this bleeding heart, sentimental, overly optimistic girl who is so emotional and so filled with overwhelming, overpowering love. She also has a darker and more cynical side. And the audience of Avatar has this distinctly in their mind because the last episode immediately before this is the Southern Raiders. A devastating, poignant episode that penetrates to the core of Katara's lingering bitterness and grief and the violent actions it can lead her to. So Katara has reason to be annoyed by this betrayal, but it's just that. It's an annoyance. It's nothing more serious than that. For Zuko, this spectacle is much darker. It reflects back every terrible thing he did in his life, as he says. It captures his constant obsession with the Avatar, his constant obsession with honor, his willful apathy toward his kind and caring uncle, and his unwillingness to detach himself from the ideology of the Fire Nation, as militant and zealous as that ideology could become. Zuko is in between sides to an extent, and he is no one's hero in this world. While Team Avatar forgives him, they take a long time to forgive him. The Fire Nation views him both as a buffoon and a traitor, and there was only a very short amount of time at the start of Season 3 when they viewed him more positively. The people who just see him as the son of the Fire Lord, such as the ordinary citizens we see in Zuko Alone, episode 207, are not likely to be very generous toward him or willing to see that he has changed. Zuko is in this liminal state wherein he does not really have anyone who is ardently willing to be on his side, who is ardently willing to support him. And so he feels dreadfully alone, and there is not a lot preventing him from sinking into that despondency. He finds some degree of comfort and clarity in doing what he believes to be right, but looking at a play like this that demonstrates how far he's strayed from that path he believes to be the righteous one crushes him. What Zuko tries so hard to do through his attempts to reconnect with his uncle after this point, and honestly he tried to reconnect with his uncle before when he leaves Ozai's presence only to find that Iroh has already broken himself free, is what he tries to do also when he attempts to connect with Team Avatar, or simply when he tries to be a noble and kind-hearted Fire Lord. He is wanting to believe that he can put distance between himself and his past. He is wanting to believe that he can sever himself from the person he once was. He does not want to be that person anymore, and he hopes that he is not fatally doomed to be that person. But spectacle is outward. It is showy, it is dramatic, it is ostentatious. It does not have the subtle gradations that accompany internal changes of a magnitude such as that which Zuko has undergone. Zuko is not the same person that he was. We know that as the audience because we've been watching this slow, gradual process of transformation. But Team Avatar doesn't know that when they first see Zuko try to prostrate himself before them, and so they're reluctant to accept him. And that's Team Avatar. They're relatively nice and caring people, as opposed to mere broad spectacle which draws on these stereotypical images of people. And so Zuko is cast in the image of this idiot buffoon who is also this horrible traitor to his country. That is the image that is perpetuated into the world. Walter Benjamin talks about mass culture and mass production as removing the aura of a sense of placedness, a sense of place. Removing the aura of the original and flooding and saturating the environment with all of these copies, with all of these images. And so the distinction between the single original and all of the copy is lost to a certain extent. This sounds really abstract, so let me be very concrete. Say that you are looking at a painting in a museum. A couple centuries ago, that was the only place you could go if you wanted to see that exact painting. Now, you can see that painting all over the internet, just by tapping a few fingers on the keyboard. Now, that's not the same experience, but it is a similar experience, and the boundaries between the two images, the mere photograph that's flooding the internet and the actual image itself that you see in the museum, that becomes blurred and distorted to an extent. And something is lost in this process, because you can't replicate the process of being in the presence of something real and original. The Pre-Raphaelites, with their ardent attack on mass manufacturing culture, understood this quite well. And it's the same thing with personal relationships, personal dynamics, albeit in a slightly different sense. We can have all these images of who Zuko is, but none of them can really compare to Zuko himself. Those are just objects. Well, Zuko is a subject. He is one who can define himself. He is one who can make his own choices and decide his own destiny. These images are wrong, not just because they're negative and because they're cheap and because they're badly written, although they are all that, but because they do not reflect, cannot reflect, the tortured, conflicted spirit within Zuko. Even when the images become more positive, like they do after he becomes Fire Lord, they do not quite convey the fullness of Zuko. Zuko sees this horrible reflection of all the bad things he's done up on the stage and is terrified because he thinks, am I still that person? Am I doomed to be that person? And the answer is, of course, no, he's not. But the process by which he overcomes that fear and arrives at this position where he can fully sever and disconnect the person he is now from the person he once was is long and arduous and difficult. This is Zuko's challenge in the Firebending Masters, in a way. He must try to move beyond his past and prove that he's not the person he was, that he can be a different person. And in a weird way, that's also the challenge here in the Ember Island Players. It is, in any case, a much more dramatic and poignant narrative than Aang getting all whiny because Katara doesn't profess her love to him in the play, and he thinks that the relationship might never be. Zuko has, I don't want to say real problems, I don't want to discount Aang's struggles, but Zuko's struggles are deeper and they're more difficult to overcome, and I think that's why Zuko resonates with so many people, especially older audiences. So thank you all for watching. If you liked what you saw today, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Donate to my Patreon if you can, and you want to see more videos like this before anyone else can. Keep watching Avatar. Great show. I hope the live-action remake, which will probably be coming out this year, is at least decent. Take care. Adios, comrades.